On this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk, my thoughts on the Story of 1999 podcast. Amari Purple Talk starts now. Welcome to episode 14 of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical Singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funksoloist, and I want to start by thanking everyone that has tuned in. I hope you're enjoying the show. Please leave your comments on the show below or on my website, www.amaricommunications.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Amari_now and on Instagram at RichardCole_Amari. All right, and with that out of the way, we're going to dive into our one and only topic today, and that's due to I've just recorded the Time Belonging in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame campaign. You may find that on your favorite podcast platform as well as YouTube. This is only the beginning. I'll do more extensive video on that later. Meanwhile, this will be our only topic since I spent all day recording that one. So this will be a very short episode of Amari Purple Talk this week. I have a few announcements at the end of the show as well. So we're going to dive into the story of 1999. So last week, an announcement was made regarding the debut of a multi-part podcast documenting the story of the recording of the 1999 album. This podcast is in conjunction with the marketing of the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition. We're a few days away from that release, and I'm excited for that release. And this was a pretty interesting campaign launched by the estate in the marketing of this special release. So the story of 1999 was hosted by Andrea Swenson. She will be contributing to the liner notes for the Super Deluxe Edition, as well as Dwayne Tudall and guy from Guns N' Roses. His name is escaping me at the moment, but Andrea Swenson, one of the contributors, is the host of this podcast. So episode 1 of this podcast has already been released. I've had a chance to listen to it a couple of times. So this episode will be devoted to my thoughts on that first episode. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to this podcast, I recommend you seek it out via your favorite podcast platform. I listen to it on my iPhone. So like I said, I've had a chance to listen to it twice so far. And so this is going to be filled with spoilers. So again, go check it out. Then come back here and listen to this one. So again, it's the story of 1999. And the story begins with one of the most legendary concert debacles in rock history. So on October of 1981, Prince was given the opportunity to open up for the Rolling Stones. Of course, that didn't go over well. The crowd for the Stones had pretty much evolved just from the screaming teeny boppers of the 60s. So by the time we get into the 70s, starting with their concert in, I'm trying to get the name correct, Altamont, this was in 1969, where they drafted the Hells Angels as bodyguards, and a brother was murdered on during that concert. It was documented live on film, and was pretty much a bad period for the Stones at that time. But they've managed to, move on from that. But the audience definitely changed from that incident. So by the time you get to 1981, you have the Stones at the pinnacle of their stadium slash arena success. And by then the crowd, as what we know now as classic rock. So fans, if you were a fan of the Stones or a fan of Zeppelin, at that time, you kind of grew up with this sort of, I don't want to say snobbery about it, but it can border on along those lines when it comes to that fandom. Sort of a lot of us being Prince supporters, we encounter that within our own groups sometime. But basically, long story short, like I said, Prince opened up for the Rolling Stones, and it wasn't a warm reception. And this is a story that's pretty well known within the history of Prince. One of the things, I was kind of shocked that this incident was sort of the fuel or inspiration in the recording of this album. Not a direct inspiration, but I would say a direct reaction in it. But anyway, the first episode pretty much covers that incident being the flashpoint for Prince seeking a broader audience and recording material that would bring that audience over. The episode contains some previews of some of the unreleased tracks from the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition. It has stories and anecdotes from Des Dickerson, Lisa Coleman, Dr. Fink, Bobby Z, engineer Peggy McCreary, journalist Robert Hilborn, and of course the estate's vault archivist Michael Howe. So these are going to be my initial thoughts, reactions to the episode. Like I said, I've had a chance to listen to it twice. I kind of wanted to get more of the stories and the anecdotes and kind of, listen in and kind of gauge my first reactions to some of the unreleased material that was leaked within this podcast. So the first thing I want to cover is the album being a reaction to both the ascendancy to crossover success and debacle of opening for the Rolling Stones. Primarily, one of the more colorful descriptions is that of Dr. Fink. In one account, he's describing the chicken bones in the Ziploc bag that was being hurled, the description of the orange juice splashing against Brown Mark's bass. It wasn't a really great scene. It resulted in the promoter, Bill Graham, chastising the audience. And everyone knows the story that the first night, they did kind of get through the first couple of songs. And then, by the time they got to Jack You Off, then it was, pandemonium after that, sadly. Also, too, if you have not had a chance to read Morris Day's book, On Time, A Princely Life in Funk, again, spoilers for that too, so if you haven't read it, go read that too. But this is not just a minor spoiler. And again, if you're familiar with the history, but what isn't well known and wasn't documented in this podcast was that Morris Day was there, and this is prior to the time the first album being recorded, or I think it may have been recorded and in the can, but at the time he was still Prince's videographer, and he documented the incident on videotape. and was one of the first to kind of reassure Prince that, it's not you, it's them. You're ahead of your time, you got this. And of course, too, this is the chance you take when wearing a trench coat, bikini briefs, and high heels. So, but it was a wonderful tale of a best friend, just kind of helping a friend get through a difficult moment. But the podcast, has anecdotes from Des Dickerson as well, also being another key figure in having Prince change his mind about not going through with it on the second night. And the second night wasn't better because, as these things happen, of course, something big happens on one night and then you go back, ready for something the next night. So, both nights didn't go over well. Like I said, now Mick Jagger did handpick Prince to be the headline act. To be the supporting act of the show. And that was on the strength of a lot of key people in New York. With Prince's performance at the Ritz, I believe, or the Roxy. Can't remember which venue. But the warm reception from critics and fellow rock musicians from those performances was what led to Mick Jagger inviting Prince to open for the Stones on this tour. And also, too, one of the few direct influences on the album 1999 was those performances in New York, leading to the inspiration for writing and recording All the Critics Love You in New York. So, again, like I said, it's never occurred to me that one key moment was one of the primary motivations for the recording of the 1999 album. And the second thing I want to cover was the use of the audio of the Rolling Stones shows. My first listen to it, I noticed, in the background there was sort of, the sound or an ambience, kind of giving the impression of, kind of placing you there at that moment. But I didn't know at the time that they actually utilized the original recording of that show. Like I said, Morris Day recounts in his book how he videotaped it. And so I'm assuming there's either it's sound from that video or maybe there was an attempt to record the concert, to document it. Because that would have been, had it been successful, that would be another key live recording that, we would probably like to see, or in some alternate universe, I would be doing a Bite the Boot segment on that performance. But speaking of which, if there is some quality audio or not so great quality audio that exists in full of this performance, again, you've heard my previous segments on various Bite the Boots projects. And basically what Bite the Boots are for newer listeners is it's an inspiration of Frank Zappa's Beat the Boots, where to stop bootleggers, Frank Zappa would basically officially release what the bootleggers are releasing, almost even down to the original artwork. So, also too, in previous episodes, I also mentioned Bob Dylan a lot because those two are just as heavily bootlegged as Prince. And in sort of making observations or doing a wish list that, hey, maybe the estate should put this out officially, that type of a thing. Bob Dylan has released a lot of his unreleased studio and live recordings. So, this is something I could visualize being included in a sort of controversy tour box set. If you do a series kind of similar to Bob Dylan's, where he covers, certain eras, say 64 to 65 or 65 to 66. And the ironic thing, both artists being from Minneapolis, the legendary Bob Dylan show where he switches from the acoustic guitar and starts adopting the electric guitar. For diehard folk music fans, that was blasphemy in their world. So it was hearsay. Heresy. That's the word I'm looking for. So it was that was not good. And, he was booed for having a rock band back him up, and he's got his, an electric guitar out and, belting out like a Rolling Stone. So, it's ironic that both of these huge influential artists, both from Minneapolis, have these sort of transitional moments, that are, very legendary in the course of their careers. So I can see at one point, if the estate ever does a document of the controversy tour as a box set, definitely include that audio as a historical document of that tour. So that's kind of snuck in a Bite the Boot segment right there, folks. So, all right, well, maybe it's not just one topic, but getting back to the topic at hand. Again, like I said, I was surprised to notice that the audio was actually from one of those shows. And it basically just documents, again, a pivotal moment. It's an artist basically paying their dues. It was also pointed out in the podcast, artists these days, it's more instant success. You get on American Idol, you get on The Voice. If you win, or sometimes even if you lose, there's a record deal waiting for you, and you're a star after that. There's no Chitlin circuit. There's no small clubs that you're playing in, and honing your craft or developing. It's kind of instant. It's like instant coffee almost now. But in the grand old days of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, you paid your dues, and this was one of the ways. You don't automatically get it right. There's tons of artists that we adore that were originally booed at the Apollo. So just kind of giving an example of that. So it's good to have this podcast kind of document this as a sort of a decisive moment or a pivotal moment. So the third thing I want to discuss on the Story of 1999 podcast were the songs. I wanted to kind of be resistant at first and I'm going to wait until, I get the box set at this point, because we've had the Don't Let 'Em Fool You. We've had the International Lover preview. We've also had one of the cuts from the live CDs drop on, the various streaming services. And I've done reviews for those as well on previous episodes. So I was kind of in the mind frame of, kind of like a film, you see the teaser trailer, then you see maybe two full trailers, and then after that you're good. You don't want to hear any more or see any more. You just want to go see the film. So I was of that mindset at first, but I couldn't resist it. So, so of course tuning into the podcast and listening, and they dropped a few of the songs. The key ones for me, Purple Music, and then Fill You Up / Irresistible Bitch. Those were the sort of standout tracks for me that were previewed. There were also snippets from the original 1999 album themselves. Now, the difference between the tracks from the official album versus some of the unreleased stuff, I really couldn't tell from listening both times. The the whatever nuances in the remaster, and that just may be due to how the podcast was recorded. So I know, like with mine, the vocal, it's done in mono. For the theme song, it's it's the stereo track and everything. But it's not. I don't mix it and master it as if I'm mixing and mastering an actual song. So there's a huge fundamental difference between both of those mixing and mastering processes. Okay, so with that being said, like I said, I couldn't immediately tell any differences, but I'm guessing that once we have the CD in hand, that will change. We'll hear the remastered differences and pick up all the little nuances. But that being said, the song Purple Music, now that's something that I've personally had as a bootleg for quite a while. And of course, the quality is not up to par. It's just something like, oh, I've got it and I can hear it. I know what I'm listening to. And, you get what you get as far as the sound quality. So it was very refreshing to hear Purple Music in a very clean, pristine quality. So it's just amped my excitement for that track even more. It's a track I've always liked and enjoyed, but listening to it on this podcast really amped my level of anticipation for listening to the entire song once we get this super deluxe edition. The next song that sort of caught my attention was Fill You Up. So this was, I'm guessing, the absolute original version of this song. And it's a track I've always enjoyed. The long stroke version for the Aborted Camille album, that was always a favorite of mine. So it was my favorite of that particular period. But this original version, I like it just as much. I would say equally to the officially released version of it. Same thing with Irresistible Bitch. This version again blew me away. It's with most artists, when you kind of hear their demos, you can tell right away that they're demos. There could be a breakdown of laughter in the track, or some of the lyrics may not have been fully fleshed out, maybe less instrumentation, that type of thing. But with Prince, the majority of this stuff that's unreleased, a lot of it, even if a lot of it was unfinished, is still better than a lot of artists' finished, officially released material. And to me, both of these songs fit in that category. They're, in a way, they're sketches, but you could have put those out in 1981 or 82, and you still could have torn up a dance floor with both of these. So again, both of these tracks really amp my excitement for this release now. So I'm really looking forward to listening to both of these songs in their entirety and enjoying them for many, many years to come too. And, really the sort of the tone or the feel. I know Irresistible was, according to the liner notes of Crystal Ball, that was one of the processes of how Prince and Morris would collaborate for time songs. The song Clarine Baconskin on Crystal Ball, in those liner notes, he gives the explanation that it's Morris on drums, him on bass, and then that's how they would brainstorm a lot of the tracks for the time. And Irresistible was singled out as one of the key songs from those collaborations. And this one, as I can't remember who said it, but he mentioned, yeah, it might have been Bobby Z, but he mentioned it. Yeah, that's Prince and Jamie Star mode, and you could tell it's great. And I'm guessing, I'm not sure of the timeline. Hopefully Dwayne Tudor comes out with a volume documenting the 1999 sessions. With that being said, to kind of get an inkling of when this was recorded, how long after the situation with the Rolling Stones show. So, because they were saying, yeah, he was definitely not in a good mood recording this song. There was one other song, Moonbeam Levels, which has now been officially released. It's on the Prince Forever compilation. That track, like I said, I didn't notice any differences between that and what's already been officially released. But it's nice to, it's a nice track to hear, and I'm glad it's on a set that's consistent with the period. So since it was recorded in that era, it's nice to have that included among the ranks there. But again, looking forward to hearing it instead of in sequence with the greatest hits, to hear it in, at least in some type of a sequence along with other tracks from that same era. So definitely looking forward to that. But like I said, my excitement didn't change my anticipation for the album one way or the other. But the Purple Music, Fill You Up, and Irresistible, those three tracks definitely have got me really hyped for the rest of this release. And like I said, too, the Fill You Up and Irresistible, to me, they sound like they could have been on, either they could have been on What Time Is It, or they could have made some very excellent B-sides. It's always kind of a shame to me that the Times B-sides didn't quite get the quality and care that Prince's got. But again, that's for obvious reasons. But, if Prince really wanted to be greedy, yeah, he could have had the time go in and just knock these out and put them on the B-side, and it still would have been the same. So either way, either as Time B-sides or deep 1999 album cuts, with those two tracks, all I know is that 16/17-year-old me would have dug those as a deep cut dive. So with that, we're going to move to the fourth and final observation for me, was that live version of Head. Man, that was funky. So again, that was taken from the live CD release of, because there's the live CD and a live DVD as well. So I believe that one was from the live CD. And again, it amps my excitement to hear both versions of that on the CD as well as the DVD. Like I said, listening to the 1999 audio live and the 1999 video that has been released so far. Like I said, both of those were amazing. This is definitely amazing. Like I said, funky. I like that lineup of the band. Like I said, Dez added a sort of, I don't know, I guess in his own words from other interviews, he was definitely the Keith Richards to Prince's Mick Jagger in that. And I know kind of once he left, it was kind of a disappointing thing for me. And it took a minute for that, Purple Rain era lineup of the Revolution to kind of, sort of win me over. It took a little bit of time to get used to it, but definitely, this is, for me, I think just my absolute favorite era of that. Like I said, being 16, 17, the time were like 2 albums deep. So they were, already solidified as my favorite band. Prince as an artist. Like I said, my gateway was Dirty Mind. Like I said, Controversy kind of amped the level a little bit. But this period, just everything about this period, that 82/83 period was, that's my favorite era, right? Right there. If I could just have an absolute favorite era, that would be the one for me. And I mean, again, Sign of the Times is like my favorite Prince album. But that's another discussion in future episodes down the line. But like I said, just the nostalgia factor now, fond memories, and just the impact, just the remembrance of, how those albums, impacted me at that age. That was definitely, a good age to, time to be 16 or 17 was during that era. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this super deluxe edition. We're a few days away. Can't wait. Can't wait for this next episode to drop too. So I think they drop every Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So episode 2 will be coming soon. So definitely check back here next episode. We will definitely have a spoiler review of episode 2 of the story of 1999. And also too, starting next week, I'm going to start doing a year in review, and that'll be kind of to replace the album spotlight. Yeah, because I haven't done it in a while, because there's, like I said, we're coming close to the end of the year now, and there's so much ground to cover. Of course, it's Prince. There's always going to be so much ground to cover. But, yeah, I kind of wanted to start now and kind of timing everything that I want to cover about everything that's been released this year, and try to wrap that up by the end of the year. So next week will be the beginning of the year in review, and I'm just going to review albums, the books, kind of recap what I've enjoyed about everything. Like I said, that'll replace the album spotlight. So tune in next week, and as always, keep it purple and on the one.